All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our session today. We're going to be talking about Temporal Cloud and how to estimate kind of costs of what this is. And actually, we're going to dive a little bit into thinking through self-hosted Temporal as the service itself and what that means as well. And I'm going to be joined by two of my colleagues. And this is basically, what is this? This is the fourth of these we've done. This is the fourth of five in a series where we're talking about Temporal Cloud. The past events have been pretty successful. We've had some great feedback, so I hope this one will be valuable for you all as well. The first three are available on our YouTube channel, so if you want to go check them out, please do, or reach out to us. We'll send you links and whatnot. So we're going to talk about estimating actions and costs, and then if this is all really great, well, next week, we're going to talk about migrations to Temporal Cloud and how that works as well. If you want to register for the series, there's a URL. If you dig QR codes, go for it. So that's kind of our talk track for today. So with that, I want to invite our presenters on. So Smitty and Manu, do you guys want to join me here? Are you guys on video? All right, guys.
Yeah, hey Jim.
All right.
Hi.
Hey, Smitty. Hey, guys. Hey, Manu. How are you guys?
Great.
Great.
Doing great.
Cool. So as with everything, guys, these are meant to be conversational, a little bit loose, but open for everybody to have questions. These are two people who have a whole lot of experience with Temporal Cloud and Temporal in general, I should just say. Smitty, do you want to just give a quick introduction of yourself and what your role is here at Temporal?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. And yeah, thanks for having us. Yeah, my name is Smitty. I am part of the solutions architecture team at Temporal. Been here for almost 2.5 years. And since then, I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of customers, assessing Temporal and Temporal Cloud. And I'm super glad that we're here to talk about cost, essentially cost running yourself, as well as like the benefits of running in Temporal and the value that you get out of that. So yeah, looking forward to the discussion.
Right on. Thanks, Smitty. And Manu, do you want to give a quick intro as well?
Sure. So I'm Manu. I'm a software engineer on the Temporal Cloud team. I've been here for about 3 years, and a lot of the stuff I've worked on is actually around metering and billing for Temporal Cloud. So excited to talk about and answer any questions folks might have.
Cool. Probably pretty similar to some of the things that maybe people on the call are doing. Trying to figure out SaaS services are not easy. Manu, what did you work on before you worked on cloud? I mean, cloud's been around for what? We've been working on it for a while. What did you work on before cloud?
When I first joined, we had not released the V1 of the OSS product yet. We were still 0 point whatever. So the first few months was just trying to get to a production-ready OSS release. And then after that, we sort of switched over to starting to make a managed service for it.
Right. Yep. So Manu's had incredibly deep experience on Temporal Server, y'all, and really what it means to prop up the service itself. Many do this self-hosted today. So that's kind of what the gist of this conversation. So what we just wanted to talk through today is really kind of like there's two sides of Temporal. And very clearly what we're talking about is the temporal service. And the temporal service is basically like the big brain in the sky that is capturing state of your application and knows what you should do next, basically. If you're familiar with temporal and how to use it, you just code using the SDK. There's workers that live in your environment that communicate with the server and all this stuff. We're not talking about kind of the application side of this today. We're really focused squarely on the temporal service itself. And the service is comprised of a bunch of different things, and I'll let Smitty get into that. But that is really kind of the key piece of how this all works together. Of course, this all works together, but our focus today is really on the right-hand side. So, if people are using Temporal, Smitty, and they're going about this, they're going to self-host, they're going to use cloud, whatever. What are all the various different components that go into kind of the service itself on that side?
Yeah, there's a lot, Jim. So yeah, I think one of the common things across both, if you're going to run Temporal yourself, is you need a compute infrastructure. So it's actually listed here, but that's where you start. So Kubernetes or whatever platform of choice that you have within your organization. So, and then on top of that, of course, if you want to run Temporal, you have your application, which is running in workers, and you have to, address the concerns related to scale and performance and so on for your application. And then temporal, kind of abstracting away all of the reliability concerns. It doesn't do that through magic. It does it through a sophisticated stack of components. So you've got the temporal, server itself, which is four or arguably five distinct services, the history matching front end and internal worker, and then a web tier. So you have all of that, just those, and each of those need have different behaviors to scale. Then underpinning everything is a data persistence layer. So you have a lot of choices there, and depending on level of availability and scalability that you need, you might use a SQL-based Postgres MySQL, or move up to Cassandra. And of course, with all of that, you have tons of operational concerns. And then augmenting, if you're using advanced visibility, Elasticsearch is a good idea. And again, Elastic at scale is its own thing to manage. Then if you are running this yourself in an enterprise, you likely will want to have network security address how you access your internal hosted service and so on. And then that leads to security, authentication, integration into your own IDP, et cetera, like who has access. And that gets complicated when you start thinking about encryption and using our data converter and codec server, and you want to manage access to sensitive data and so on. So, and then finally, if you're going to run a 24/7 operation, you have observability to contend with as well. So monitoring, alerting, consuming metrics, understanding what to do with the metrics and everything.
And so, to get this to production, there's kind of like a bunch of different things you have to do here, Smitty, across all of these. I want to drill in a little bit into one thing. You talked about the temporal server itself and the core services. You talked about, matching pods, history pods. What are all the costs? Like there's individual costs with key components in the server. It isn't like just one, right? I mean, what are all the things you have to actually think about from not operationally? We'll come back to the operational costs, but like just the hardware costs, just setting up the server.
Yeah, well, so each of those services are horizontally scalable, like we're designed to scale horizontally to extremely large workloads. So you have to contend with how big are each pod, memory, CPU, I/O, all of those normal concerns with operating any sort of service, and the behaviors of each one of them interacting with each other as the service scales and takes on more and more load, different applications, different size and shape of applications that might behave differently or behave differently at different times of your business period, months, weeks, and so on. So it's a well-oiled machine that you're trying to get to.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. We had internal conversations. We're talking about like the server and the service and all the things that go together into that. Like, what is the service itself? And it is really kind of all these things wrapped up together. And self-hosting this, you kind of got to go through and do all these different things, right? That is the cost stack, I guess. I kind of messed up on my things, but like then there's the operational costs, Smitty, right? Like, so not only do you have to procure and set up and do all this stuff, but or just, I guess, procure the software and the hardware, but then there's the operational stuff. You want to walk through some of this as well?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So this is really what we just talked about is more just the tech stack, right? It's just all the elements that you need to have, and then kind of delving into like care and feeding of it you're just looking at that list. Each one of those areas, as you started to mention, has their own concerns. So, essentially the way I look at this is from an operational perspective, you start with an SLA. Like what exactly does the business expect of your applications at the beginning? And then how does the platform need to behave in order to deliver upon that business SLA? So then that cascades down into, you have to plan for being up a certain amount of time of the business period, 99.9, 99.95, what have you. So each one of those services and components needs to be able to support that. So that requires a ton of resiliency, a ton of redundancy, and then all of the planning, testing, um, continuous optimizing, as you bring on more workloads. And so it's daunting. And then, through that, like you're then also just keeping up with updates, security updates, software patches across that entire stack. And so that is again, a continuous operation. A lot of this can be automated. A lot of it can be, pushed out to managed services, but you still need to kind of have your hand on the wheel for all of it, and especially through kind of big business events and other things. And then on one more layer is high availability, considering cloud service interruptions. So business continuity planning. So there's a lot to consider operationally. And then finally, like once you got that sort of dialed in, then you have to run a 24/7 operational center, or on call, what have you, that of a team that can handle any issue across the stack.
Right. And so Smitty, by the way, the disaster recovery side of things in any piece of software is always kind of critical and always a challenge from both operations and from a hardware and setup point of view, right? I think it's to me, that's the one I think, depending on workload and what you want to do, can get really difficult. And quite honestly, I think people underestimate the difficult nature of doing upgrades of software. I know there's just thousands of millions of pieces of software out there that are running with unpatched old versions of things, which is always kind of interesting, that's a whole other story. Just keeping up with that alone, I think is often very difficult. Now, look at y'all, like I get it. Yeah, we're the vendor, we're talking about the operational costs. I've been in SaaS companies before. You could see this with anything. I think when you combine this with like the hardware it takes to actually do this in the back end, is where things get a little bit, you use the word daunting, Smitty, which I think is pretty interesting. But I think it's also kind of interesting to look at it from a time point of view. And like, if you use a managed service, and like a managed service, like a regular managed service, sure, Smitty, I can talk about all these things. It's pretty simple, straightforward, right? But like what we're seeing from customers is a little bit a different kind of value chain, right? And so like it's kind of a value over time, correct?
Oh, without question, it's value over time. I think this slide is I love this slide because what it does is it describes the kind of the life cycle, or sort of the journey that a customer or user, a open source user, might take in adopting and then starting to use Temporal in production. So if you're a team like that just kind of discovered Temporal, and you're using the open source, you've got your own lab, you've got local environments, you actually have to invest, so you need to seek budget and get approvals to, get to that first little green stair step. And those stair steps each are something you have to plan and deploy, and then get your operational, house in order. And whereas with cloud, that beginning is like, with the way our pricing works, is like you essentially for temporal usage, you pay as you go, you pay only for what you use. And so you can just start with very little investment. So then as you go through, moving towards, you get your first application in production, and you're finally kind of like, sort of leveling out in terms of cost of ownership. Suddenly maybe other applications come on board. And so you have some big event coming that you want to plan for, and you've got another big stair step that you have to plan in terms of capacity, cost, and so on. Again, like Temporal Cloud allows you to simply just push traffic to us, push your applications through to us, and you just pay for what gets used.
So Smitty, just really quickly, like in that context, what you're describing is something I think of as more as like serverless. Like like one of my favorite services of all time is Google Cloud Run. Dump a container into a thing, get traffic on it. It scales, right? Like, is it really as simple as that, or how does this work from a cloud point of view? This is a pretty continuous line here, right?
Sure. There's truly nothing is serverless, because there's always servers on somewhere, and it's a matter of who's managing the servers. Yeah, there's all the, like that's a whole topic in itself. And I came from AWS before, so it's a topic I know and love. But in terms of temporal, I think you can think of it as a just this, I think you called it the brain in the sky, but it's an endpoint that does what temporal does, and you can just count on it.
Right. And then the last thing here is like this last point on here is like scaling beyond self-hosted, which is an interesting point to make. How do we do that? Right. Because like, I don't know. I mean, there's some pretty smart people who could run a great service, who have come from huge companies. What is it about cloud that's unique? It allows us to do that.
Well, I'm going to put Manu on the spot in a second,
Great.
but yes, because Manu works in the team that is doing that with us. So, everything we talked about with Temporal running the open source, you have to manage that stack, but then there are scale limitations that you're going to run into for each of those components. Like there's only so large EC2 instances or cloud instances that are available. Certain technologies, certain databases can only go so far. And so in order to handle even greater capacity, like sort of hyperscale, social media scale, you need to customize temporal. You need to start in doing your own engineering to handle beyond what some of these core technologies can handle directly. So we do that. That's part of our expertise, and kind of the innovation that we're driving here at Temporal is to make the platform one that is hyperscale, that we can operate at a much greater efficiency level and sort of cost level, and handle a huge volume of customers and namespaces very effectively and efficiently.
Right.
Manu, like, want to add to that? Just like, 'cause I think this is where, like, I think our reliability story and just like the innovation that we've done is so exciting.
I mean, I think you covered a significant portion of it. Temporal OSS has like a pluggable Cassandra, a Postgres SQL, a store that folks can use, but we have a dedicated team which is focused on a much more high performant, better lower latency, much higher throughput that you would get in the cloud. And we've actually had customers who switch from self-hosted to cloud and are shocked that their latency dropped, which is kind of the opposite of what you might expect when you're going from a self-hosted to a cloud solution. So yeah.
Yeah, Manu, we talked about that last time, and we had Sergey on last week or 2 weeks ago, whatever. I think we were all at an offsite last week, so 2 weeks ago, where we talked about the custom persistence layer that we built for cloud. So if anybody's really interested in diving into, how we do caching, the write-ahead log, like how we built a custom persistence layer for cloud, and again, like the surprise, like we saw with some of the performance characteristics of it and the scale, I think that would be a great session for y'all to check out. I mean, if you're going to handle like, I don't know, I mean, Manu, we're doing like web scale loads on that thing, right? Like like when you start thinking about volumes on cloud and like how far it can go, like I had this infinite scale on my chart, right? Like it's never infinite, right? But like it goes pretty far, right? I mean, from a scale point of view.
Yeah, I mean, our initial target with this feature was like, million requests per second, and we want to continue to grow that as the scale goes up.
It's awesome. Yeah, I think it's pretty interesting, y'all. And so, like I said, if you guys want to check out how that works and what we're doing there, do feel free. Okay, so that's great. Like, so these are all the things that you're going to think about, right? You got to think about hardware, you got to think about the operational costs. And then really kind of with the third vector that we wanted to put in here at the very beginning of this presentation was like, okay, and then over time, what are the big challenges that you're going to have, right? How do you kind of like smooth out your budget as opposed to have these kind of big steps that we were talking about? But Smitty, let's talk a little bit about like, okay, great. What do I got to think about from a pricing point of view? I'm going to go back into this deck. I think we had let me get back to the deck here. I know I can do this, but there's like different dimensions and components of our pricing structure, correct, Smitty? You want to just walk through these, and we'll just, we'll let Manu talk more about actions, but like at a high level.
For sure. Yeah. So temporal, as basically a platform and a technology that helps manage state. We began with, like if you're operating temporal, you understand kind of state transitions. Like every time your application changes or moves from one step to another, we're capturing all of that. So we made a decision in our pricing scheme to up level to something that was more intuitive to how temporal is used in the business or used by for an application. So we've come up with this actions-based paradigm, which effectively is like how many things are happening in your application or service. So a workflow, like a business process starts, and that's an action. And then all the steps, all the things that you can use in temporal. We'll get into kind of specifics, but like all of those count as like invoking an action. So that's what we meter, that's what we measure, and that's what we charge for. And yeah, and it's a utility essentially. So you just you can optimize your application to use more or less of that kind of the units of measure that we provide. And then the second is storage. We have customers that have sophisticated applications that use more storage. We have customers that run very, very like millisecond workflows with just very little data. And the storage that's persisted is something that we also have to measure in order to ensure that we're operating cost effectively. So, but we've been able to, like, if you were to run temporal yourself, storage is kind of a monolith. Everything goes in the database, and and essentially you have to cover the cost of that. But Manu, maybe I'll ask you, like, so on storage, looks like we have two different ways that we charge for storage. Do you want to maybe hit on why we break those out?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, just as a general guideline here, this doesn't apply to all use cases, but what we've seen in cloud is that of your total bill for the average use case, storage ends up being like 3%, 3 to 5% of the total bill. So storage billing is more to protect against abuse and people storing vast amounts of data in our system. The way you can view active storage is these are running workflows. With running workflows, they're active and you can keep having more events, more activities finished, so they can keep growing. So they tend to be a little more expensive. But then once the workflow is closed, and I think there was a question about retention periods, then that history is sort of closed. It's immutable at that point, right? So it can be actually stored in a slightly colder storage, hence the significant orders of magnitude difference there. So with closed storage and again in active storage, like compared to actions, it tends to be a very small fraction of the overall cost. Again, depends on your scenario. If you're having lots of long-running workloads with large histories that remain open, it could vary based on that.
And I think, Manu, that's one of those things that people get used to once they start using temporal for a while. Like this whole concept of a long-running workload, I think was something that took me a bit to actually start to understand it. It does start to make sense though. I mean, and it's there to protect from like overusage of storage, but like there's a lot of value in running long-running workloads too, right?
Yeah, and I think the way you can look at it is that if you have 1 million workflows that are just sitting there idle and each takes a kilobyte of storage, then for this calculation, that would be your $1 a day for that, right?
That's right. So Manu, so we get a lot of questions about actions. And so in our docs, y'all, you can go look at like how we describe what actions are, how we talk about them, how we it's about, $25 per million, but it's not like you have to do $25. It's basically all rated as you do it. And Manu, you've been working on basically building out how we rate these things, right? And so, we go through kind of what actions are. Like, how do you describe what actions are, Manu? Like, you're the one who's doing the work, right? So you're the person.
Yeah. So the idea behind actions is that we only charge money when the customer is getting value out of it. In essence, their workflow is making progress or performing work. So you can see this is not a comprehensive list. There's probably some nuanced edge cases here, but you can see for the most part, starting child workflows, starting regular workflows, scheduling timers, sending signals, activities, etc. Those are all things that count as actions. Things like I would like to list the workflows that are open, or I'd like to look at the current workflow history state or the current state of workflow. That is not a billable action because that's not really pushing your workflow progress forward. So that's sort of the theme we sort of take when we decide like what we consider billable actions and what are not.
Right. And then how would somebody think about this in terms of their code, right? Like if you just gave somebody like, hey, somebody who's kind of been working within workflows and activities, like what's your general consensus, Manu, in terms of like, I don't know, like complexity versus cost. You know what I mean? Like, do you think about that? Like, what would you say to somebody? We'll get into a little bit more in a couple, like in a little bit, but like, I'm just interested in the context of this.
Yeah, I mean, I think given like the high rate of actions, per dollar value, it's something that for many users you don't necessarily think about. And then when you do have a high scale use case, you run it, and then if need be, you can sort of change your workflow if you need to minimize it. But most of the time, it turns out that I think just doing the right thing from a architectural point of view and a programming point of view ends up also being the most optimal solution from a cost-based approach anyway.
Yeah, that's great. And so just guys, I'm gonna move it along so we can get to kind of how to estimate. We'll do like some t-shirt sizing and some stuff. So Smitty, I'm just going to cover off on this. I know we had talked about it, but somebody was asking about support and are we going to have like a low cost tier? We're working on that right now. Constantine had asked that in the chat. So we're working on that right now. But right now, to run the temporal service, the minimum is there is a support fee per month of 200. And that's sure it's break fix, but it's much more than break fix. We get you onboarded, we do design reviews, get you into production, do best practices. And quite honestly, Manu, some of the work we do is around like working with people to refine their workloads and activities and it like to actually optimize and create more efficient workloads. And so our team works with you to make sure that your instance is going to be extremely efficient or high performant or low latent. And so these are the things that, I think people underestimate the value, but it's kind of like you get free professional services if you're a Temporal Cloud customer, so I think that's kind of a big deal here. So it is kind of the last piece of pricing, and we're happy to talk through kind of what those things are. So Smitty, you and I had spoken about this kind of yesterday, and we've talked about this a lot. Help me work through kind of like just if I had a workload, how do I kind of estimate what my costs are going to be? Because I think people don't realize like this can be really, really cheap. Somebody was talking about like, a hobby, what that means, like, well, from an actions point of view, that's pretty low, right? So like, walk me through kind of how you think about workload types, Smitty.
For sure. Yeah. So I think there's probably three scenarios that come to mind. One would be like where a lot of entry point use cases are things like just like automations and infrastructure, like augmenting things like Terraform with like wrapping with into a workflow so you can handle other business activities that are associated. So like infra provisioning is not a high volume kind of thing unless you're unless you're Netflix or some other huge organization that has massive scale requirements. But so effectively, those use cases tend to be in the small category where you may be doing certain like you can count how many things are happening per hour per day, and they're low numbers. More interesting use cases are like where you've got sort of real business process. So like an order management system, or even like I think there was and sort of in the illustration earlier is kind of like the order processing flow. So we have customers that do retail and order processing. Let's say they have workflows that represent each order, and then an order might have 10 steps in it. So if they do, so that's let's call it 10 actions. And if you do 200,000 orders a day, that's 2 million actions. So Temporal is giving you durability and a guarantee of execution of 200,000 orders for $50.
Right.
So I'll just leave that for a second. So that's one use case. Another use case that comes to mind is like batch processing, which sounds kind of mundane. It sounds kind of like straightforward, like everyone knows how to do batches. But imagine a batch is you are generating statements for your financial institution, and you have millions of customers. So we had these are real use cases we help manage. Statement generation has to be accurate and so on, and faithfully executed, or else they get in trouble. So you can do and this is actually an interesting case for long running. So we have every customer is a workflow. We have a statement generation might be 5 steps. So with 100 million customers, let's say, if you're a giant bank, it's 500 million actions per cycle. And so you get into this, large scale, but to do that yourself and build all of the infrastructure to do that kind of processing, first off, if you're doing it once a month, your like the provision for peak is huge. And if you need to get it done in a short amount of time, especially huge. So then you have to build infrastructure for some giant spike, and then it sits around for the rest of the month. So this is where like the large pricing might look a little bit big up front, but like compared to what you'd be doing yourself, it's high value. Yeah, so then you get into extra large, and then many use cases, same types or variety of use cases, or just like the mega scale. So we have social media companies, we have like global financial institutions and so on that are operating at the extra large and beyond.
How many photos of Taylor Swift can there be in one evening on social media, right? Like, and so managing that type of scale, I'm sorry to bring up the Super Bowl, Manu, with your hat and everything, but go Chiefs. Anyway, but how do we handle scale like that? And that's kind of one of those, that's like more of a mega kind of thing. I always think of it, actually we do have a kind of it's a very general pricing calculator that's on our website, y'all. Like, so there's the docs description of everything that I encourage all of you, if you really want to get into the details, there's a lot of stuff here. And at the high level on the kind of the temporal.io side, I always think about like how often is your workflow going to be executed? And then how complex is it? Right? Like it's how complex and what is your frequency? It's typically the two big dials that I think about. But Smitty, you also had kind of some things to think about as people start to estimate these things as well, right? So can you just walk through kind of the way you think about that?
Yeah, exactly. So there's, like we have open source users that come interested in exploring our cloud, and for existing use cases that are running, we actually have metrics in the open source server that you can just report out or query for how many actions per day, per month, and get it, and you'll have concrete data. So we can use that to do some calculation with you. But then, if you're doing something new or if you're extending or what have you, then we get into exactly what you just described, Jim, which is just like, let's break it down. Let's do a little bit
Yeah.
of basic modeling of the process and what's the thing doing? How long is it running? How many steps? Is it sleeping? Et cetera. And we can quickly work up, pricing. The best way though, like if you do have something that's running or you want to experiment, is just come and sign up and get something running, and we'll give you exact costs. So we
Right.
do that all the time with trials and proof of concepts and so on. We love supporting those activities.
So Smitty, there was a question in the chat, like, and this, I love this, the Alexander, thank you for this question. What if I had 20,000 workflows running every day at 9 a.m.? It's bursty. It's a small amount of total workflows per month, right? Like, where would this fall?
That's almost like the statement generation use case that I mentioned. Yeah, like you've got some sudden event or some event that you need to do very quickly. I've seen use cases where like an emergency type of use case where they need like a lot of things need to happen within seconds. And these are super interesting problems. We can scale to those to pretty much anything. But if it's depending on the degree of the spike, so 20,000, no problem. Like we'll
Yeah.
handle that. That's just like a blip, and you can work with us. So in this case, like there's no problem in handling it, and that you'd only pay for what's happening. But when we get into very, very large scale, like spike events like that, like a Black Friday or like sort of like the flash mob type of thing, like basically some like a promotion based event that you don't know what the spike's going to be, how big. Work with us, so that's where the support relationship comes in, and we'll make sure that we're ready, for your peak of peaks types of events.
Right. And you don't have all this excess capacity just sitting around waiting for 9 a.m. every day.
Yep.
My big question on 20,000 workflows, that's great. Do you have like 15 actions per workflow, 20, 100, 1,000? And that's
Yep.
really the complexity of the workflow itself is where this comes in. Because if you think about it, it's like, okay, 1,000,000 actions for $25 a month. I don't know if, I mean, at 20,000, that's pretty, there got to be some pretty complex workflows to get to 1,000,000. So it'd probably be fairly low, but we'd have to get deeper into what
Yep.
was happening, right, Smitty? So
Yeah, definitely. So I think the key thing there is how much time is required, like what's the SLA to get it all done, because then that's where we would get into a capacity conversation, like because temporal, we do have rate limits, by default, your namespace, you can run 200 actions per second. And we can easily handle bursts, and we permit bursting to double that most of the time, under most circumstances. And so we have that. That's the construct. And if you know you're going to be doing those types of activities, we can work with you and just raise your quotas, raise your limits, and so you can handle it.
great. Well, cool. There was another question here, Smitty. I'll let you answer this one. Are we thinking about providing support for self-hosted clusters?
Not at this time. It is a common question, but we believe that, and I think the challenge there is that all of the operational complexity that we talked about at the beginning is something that we would not have full control over. We understand it all, and you may make technology decisions to use one thing or another for each component of the stack, and that makes it difficult to have to establish a coherent support strategy. So it's feedback we get a lot, and right now we think that the best option, is for users to consider our cloud and try it out and work with us. Have the conversations, have the ongoing operational sort of partnership. And if you decide that self-hosting is better for you, then the community is vibrant. So including our founders are active there. Our engineering teams are active there. So you're going to get help, but we just don't have we think right now is not, we're not thinking about an enterprise support plan.
Cool. I'm going to pick off a couple of quick. So y'all, we've kind of gone through all the major stuff. I'm going to go through a lot of the questions now. Somebody had asked, hey, has pricing changed recently? They're in a different model as to what we're so like. If you have questions about your pricing, oh my gosh, reach out to our team. We are more than happy to talk about it. Yeah, and so if there's whatever we can do to help there, please do. I can't really answer explicitly about explicit accounts or what's going on. But there was I don't know if you're looking at the QA, Manu, but there was a question from Justin Walker, I love his last name, about heartbeats. And, are heartbeats really kind of like progress of a workflow? Why are they billed the same as kind of everything else? I guess, have we thought about kind of weighing the immensity of an action and the value of an action, or creating some sort of like, heaviness factor and that sort of thing? I hope I'm paraphrasing the question correctly. I don't know if you read it, Manu, but like, have we thought about that? Because a heartbeat is just a heartbeat. It's not really progress, but it is kind of progress. I don't know. Have we thought about that?
Yeah, so I think there's two different things that heartbeats provide, right? So the first one, which I think what the question is referring to, is that really you can argue the heartbeat is a proxy for did my worker die, right? If my worker died, at some point that activity needs to be rescheduled and go forward. And I think there's certainly an interesting case to think about in the long term. Maybe that is something we could potentially optimize for. The second case is that I could have a long running activity that's hours, and I want to checkpoint state so that when my activity resumes, I am resuming from like the last checkpoint of state. So I'm avoiding redoing the work over and over again. And in that particular case, that is actually because that is the main use case for heartbeat as well, as I can store where I was so I can resume on a crash. And that involves, writing to the database and providing value in the sense that, hey, like I made progress here. If I crash, resume from this point forward. So I think with heartbeats, especially the fact that you can store state and use that to resume where you left off from is the key value prop there. I think it's a great question that if you only care is the worker dead so I can reschedule it, that's something that maybe in the future it could be something that is potentially optimized.
Right.
I'll add just that
please go ahead, Smitty.
Not every single heartbeat gets counted as a discrete action. So if just reading the fine print of the way we meter for heartbeats, that has shifted a little bit, and that is in the past months, let's say, past quarter. So yeah, talk to us. Like we can go over that in detail. It gets into like, heartbeat timeout, expirations and things like that. But not every heartbeat is recorded and, or metered to be charged. So it's like so I think that the becomes a question of like, how should you apply heartbeats?
That's right.
And I think what Manu described is exactly what you'd want to get into.
Right. Cool. Thanks, guys. There was a question about kind of throttling and namespaces. This is I don't know, I'm trying to read through the question a little. I don't know if you guys have read this one. But is it possible do we do any throttling to help our customers like reduce the amount of cost per month? Do we, set a limit like, hey, I want my spend to be $10 a month, and can we throttle back so they're only hitting so many actions across that time? I guess that's the way that I think about that. Like, are we doing that yet, Manu? I mean, the question was about self-hosted, but you would have to do that yourself as self-hosted. Are we doing that in the cloud at all?
So in cloud, so that's a great question. First of all, so as far as cloud is concerned, we have heard about multiple requirements that, hey, I have a dev namespace, I have a prod namespace.
Right.
I don't want the dev namespace to consume more than X dollars, right? Because it's a dev namespace, and that's not a good use of money if something goes out of control. So there is stuff on the roadmap in the cloud to sort of be able to provide let the customer define ceilings or get alerts on like usage for certain namespaces. For this question, since it seems pertain to self-hosted, there are knobs that exist which you can limit the overall, processing rate for the system
Right.
as a whole, if that's something you desire to do for your self-hosted deployment.
Cool. Thank you, Manu. Let's see here. There was a question about storage pricing. Does it include both history and visibility records, Cassandra, Elastic? I guess, to me, guys, I mean, our storage pricing consumes all of that, right? It abstracts all of that into kind of what a workflow is, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, so the way we count storage pricing for cloud is purely workflow event history size, right? So that's something, and in fact, if you go to a completed workflow in the UI, we have the workflow history size there. So you can see like, okay, this is how many bytes of storage it would be charged, but it doesn't include, every workflow has a visibility record that's not included. It's currently based purely on the workflow event history size.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, it's encompassed in those two pricing dimensions though.
That's right.
There's no other hidden cost.
That's right. It's just that is the basically what it includes, right? So I'm sure that we don't have a product manager on the call, but Smitty, are we thinking about pulling usage costs from cloud so we can alert on them? This person's obviously into like FinOps and stuff, right? So are we thinking about on the roadmap, like being able to think about costs, setting alerts, allowing people to consume that information outside of the UI, that sort of stuff?
Of course. Yeah, those are hot topic requests for us to operate, to be able to meet the needs of, any sort of enterprise, and then to be able to do the cost management that has come, or the cost, like sort of cost alerting, things like that came up in another question. So yeah, I think that one of the priority features that's coming is simply to just have cost visible in our cloud UI. So that I think we can cover off probably in another session. But yeah, that's probably one of the first of many features there.
Yeah, and I think one of the key things here is I love the question here, y'all, and that's great. We're happy to talk through it. Engage with us in our community Slack channel. Our product managers are all over that. Always looking for input, always looking for advice. What's good for one customer may not could be for the next. Like, and how do we get this right for, a broad range of different people who are going to use this sort of thing, I think is the key thing. So engage with us. We build this for y'all. We're consumers of it internally, but sometimes I just don't think we're our audience, guys. I think we're too advanced in temporal sometimes. So it was also asking, go on, Smitty.
Oh yeah, no, you're moderating the questions. There was a good question that I wanted to make sure we covered.
Go for it, Smitty. Yeah.
The one and I'm sorry to cherry pick out of the list. But can you reiterate the pathway from self-hosting to cloud? So yeah, this is a topic our sales team and solutions architects talk about all the time with customers, and our developer success team as well. So we are producing, Jim, I think you can speak to some of the document, the white paper that we're producing. But we have a great story here, and like migrating workflows from self-hosted to cloud can be, in many cases, extremely straightforward. And then when you get into more advanced, like interdependent type of workflows, then we can give you guidance on how to architect your application to migrate itself. And so, and there's a lot of
Smitty,
between.
Smitty, you're killing me.
Yeah.
Dude, I was saving that question for the end because
Oh, sorry.
that was foreshadowing for next week. So next week, we're going to talk all about migration, all of those questions. We're going to have some good resources on the call to talk through all those nuances. So I was saving that one, Smitty.
That's a
So
must see. Mike Nichols from our team, the solutions
yeah.
architecture team, is going to be leading that, and looking forward to it.
So please join us next week. Anybody asking those questions or anybody who's more interested in like, great, how do you go through this migration process? Should be a pretty good session. So again, conversational and hopefully engaging where you can ask all your questions. Somebody's asking, are we going to provide a free tier with cloud with a very low rate limit? I don't know. Maybe. I don't want to answer for a product manager, but I got to tell you, we think about this a lot. I'll leave it there. I'm not gonna go any further than that without getting into trouble. But we're definitely thinking about it, y'all. It's definitely something that is important to us. It's important to y'all. It's just how people learn and do software these days. So yeah, we're going down that path. In at least in my mind, I'm not going to answer for everybody. How's that? I'm not going to get in trouble. So the last question we had here, I don't know if Manu, did you read through this last one?
Is this about RDS?
Yeah, the RDS question. Yeah. Can you paraphrase? I don't have time to go through it.
Yeah, so it sounds like somebody wants to do a self-hosted. They're running a self-hosted thing with RDS as their backend store, and they're asking, like, for that situation, what is the right hardware provisioning needed for 1,000 workflows? And they're also asking about the estimated load of 40 million actions per month. I think so. So I think on this call, specifically speaking to like the exact hardware requirements and everything needed, it is not possible. I would definitely reach out and then somebody can definitely work with you and figure that out. I would say for the second one, if the estimated load of 40 million actions a month is the same as the infra cost to run self-hosted yourself, that's actually a win, because it's not just the infra cost at that point, right? You have somebody who has to understand the topology and do the management and things like that. So there's a whole human cost that would not be involved there. And then lastly, again, I don't know if this is still true, so this could be a stale answer, but I think Postgres has typically been used for like much smaller throughputs, and that for higher throughput deployments, typically Cassandra, because it's more horizontally scalable, is the recommended case for that.
Yeah, for self-hosted, that's where people are typically going. So
yeah, the second part of that question, our cost would be $50 a month, so keep that in mind. And you guys, the question was, if I'm running 40 million actions a month, is what the question was, Smitty, just to reiterate. Yeah. And Daniel, so for this, I certainly would recommend posting that question or searching on the community. This is a very common, is an FAQ, and just would be tough to get into over.
Our team talks about this with people all day long, and we're happy to walk through your explicit case and take whatever time you want to need to do that. Smitty's team, I know you all do a whole lot of work there, Smitty. So thank you, because I think you've been a great resource, just general people just thinking about this thing. But then again, y'all, like the community Slack channel, also a great place to go to get more information. So we burnt through all the questions. Guys, I appreciate y'all doing this. We thought about a half hour, but there was just a lot to talk about. And there were some really good questions along the way. So thank you for everybody, for those who did stick around all the way to the end here. I think we didn't have that much people drop off. So, but Smitty and Manu, thank you for doing this very much, guys.
Yeah, thank you. My pleasure, for sure. Yeah, it was great to.
Cool. And everybody else, thank you for joining. Again, this is the 4th of 5 webinars that we're doing on Temporal Cloud. Especially the people who are asking questions about migrations, if you're interested in that, the one and only, the imitable Mike Nichols, who's on our team, will be with us next week. He's definitely been through a fair amount of migrations himself. So if you're all interested in how to do that, what this entails, please join us next week. But with that, again, thanks guys for doing this. I hope everybody enjoyed themselves. Give us some feedback and have a great day.